everybody, and welcome to episode 15 of Gamers Without Borders. Once again, I am joined by Ozzie Arcane.
Greetings.
Starting with you this time. And Johnny Chase.
I'm shaking and baking, but mostly bacon. It is hot as hell out here today.
Yes, it is very hot. Both of you from reviewersunknown.com, as am I, of course. And we're going to continue our discussion about video game TV shows and video games in TV shows, just to kind of flesh out the topic a little bit. These have a much broader definition, but less shows that actually qualify, I believe.
Yeah, at least less that we actually remember.
Well, I want to start with one that I very fondly remember. Well, maybe not fondly, because it always kind of bugged the crap out of me. The Nickelodeon game show Nick Arcade. Did either of you watch this show?
Wasn't that the show where the kids went through a video game and they were green screened onto the arcade screen?
Yeah, they were chroma keyed. That was the bonus round. The first two rounds before, they had him move around the character avatar Mikey. They had him moving through the grid and encountering different obstacles there. But the biggest thing of this, it was more or less a standard quiz show where they landed on things and answered questions. They got points based on that. But the big thing that everybody always loved on this show was the video challenge, where they had to go play a particular arcade game. It wasn't really an arcade game. It was just kind of a NES setup to an arcade machine. And they had to get a particular challenge, like X number of points in the first round, or usually it was points, actually.
I do vaguely remember that, and like you said, they weren't always actual arcade games, because I remember them playing a console game and being like, but that's not what?
Yeah, it was, because, I mean, if you look at them, they just had like a controller just kind of sitting there on the arcade cabinet, and the show was always fun, because, I mean, it was at the age, it was video games, but the kids in this show were so bad at these games. It was ridiculous. It's like if the challenge was beat the first level of Super Mario Brothers, they would die on the first Goomba. Or if it was the challenge is get 50 coins, they would avoid everything. And I don't know who the hell would ever do that, really.
Sounds like they just picked the kids up off the street or something.
That's what I think, because it was filmed at Nickelodeon Studios, so you kind of have to assume that the kids are kind of around. So I guess they would just kind of pick, okay, who wants to be in the audience for this episode? We're going to film 5 episodes today, which is usually what they did with game shows. Since they run in about 30 minutes, it only takes them about 30 minutes to shoot them, so they shoot a lot of them in a day.
Maybe they're too used to using the Power Glove.
Sometimes I think some of these people could play better with the Power Glove. But, I mean, as some of them were actually fairly decent at the arcade games, but they would just pick ones that, I'm going to play that one, and they just clear through it. They called it the Wizard's Challenge. And where they had to usually get a number of points by the end of a certain time, or occasionally, clear a board. Like, if it was Bubble Bobble, the challenge would be to clear the first board in, 30 seconds or...
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's one of those things
almost
where
a trivial concept, but these kids, I've seen them where they pause the game and they can't figure out how to unpause it, and they end up losing all their time trying to figure out how to unpause it.
It's one of those things where if you're actually a gamer, it's just very underwhelming to watch.
It's not only underwhelming, it's cringeworthy. It's like you're watching somebody playing Portal, and you've played through the game 20 times, and you know exactly how to do it, and they keep failing the exact same puzzle because they keep trying to beat it the same way that didn't work last time. It's a jackal! It's a jackal! It looks like a jackal! It's a jackal! But the other really flagship thing about this show was in the final bonus round, they would go into the video world and they'd play through these various challenges that were all green screened. But they're always so terrible at these as well. You know that they're just looking at this monitor and they see themselves superimposed over the game footage. But a lot of times they wouldn't even pay attention to any of that. They would just kind of be wandering around randomly. And the people who ran this game were ruthless. If they weren't paying attention or they couldn't reach the pause, touch to unpause button, they wouldn't unpause the game. It's like they have to touch the restart button, and they can't reach it. They're jumping because they're too short and they can't reach it. They won't give them any slack. They won't cut them any slack. They just won't unpause the game for them until they climb the ladder and jump over and touch it in midair.
Right. Now I got a question. I got a question about that. No, Nick Arcade is actually something I never saw because I didn't here in Canada. We didn't get Nickelodeon. We had YTV. But for this, it sounds a lot like that British show Nightmare.
Nightmare.
Where the
It
kids
is
are guiding
somewhat
the
like
kids,
that, but it was the primary. The first two rounds were just question and answer rounds, where they had a bunch of like quizzes and short video quizzes and video puzzles to figure out. But the final round, they had to clear through 2 levels. They always worked in pairs in groups of 2. So they had one kid and they had the other kid, and they one of them would clear through 1 level. Sometimes they would just kind of be walking around, or they actually had some really cool levels. Like there was one where they had to throw snowballs at penguins, and they had to destroy 5 of them to advance to the next round. There's another one where they're rafting down a river, and they actually had them in a little raft on the green screen. It's filmed from above, and they actually slide a left and right along the screen.
Yeah. Well, my question with the green screen is now if they're in pairs of 2, is one person watching the closed circuit TV telling the kid what they're seeing? Because
one of them would do one round, and the other one would do the other round. So I'd imagine they were just set up in the room next to each other, or in separate parts of the studio, because everything took place behind the gameplay studio. They kind of open these big doors, they had smoke pouring out, and they go into the video dimension, I think it called.
I could have swore that one of them was on the outside, just kind of rooting the other one on while they were going through. But...
No, they were one of them, because then once they each clear their own rounds, then they go together against the video wizard. I still remember their names. It was Murloc, Scortia, and Mongo. And they don't even actually fight the wizard. They just have to collect 3 power balls in separate corners of the screen without taking too much damage. And if they touch any of the enemies, they take damage and they have to try again. And it's the easiest way to beat it. Because there's one in the top left corner, one in the top right corner, and then one right down in the middle. All you had to do is you touch one, touch the other, and then the white on the bottom touches the third, and it's over. Because you have your post-hit invincibility. They actually put that into the game, where if they take damage, they won't take damage again for another second or so. So they could just run past the wizard. But they never cooperated with each other. And I imagine that they're just in a green screen looking at a monitor, the output. I hope it's a fairly big monitor so they can actually see it from wherever they are, because it's just
it was incredibly cheesy though, because the way they portrayed it, they actually tried to portray it to the viewer like these kids were actually entering a video game.
Yes, which but they did so much worse than they would if they could actually see things, because they couldn't see where their hands were pointed or where they were standing. But they had a lot of really creative final round worlds, because they had probably at least 20 different stages that they could play through, and they're all really different. Some of them are haunted houses or ancient temples. And there's always power-ups they could find, where they get the power-ups and they freeze all the enemies, or they get the power-ups and they destroy everything. And it was really cool, but a lot of the kids were just so bad at it. And you watch this, it's I could do so much better than any of these kids. But, of course, you would never get into it, because I lived in California, and they always shot in Florida, so...
Because you lived in California.
Yes. But, it was similar to Nightmare in that sense, where they used the green screen, but they could actually see what they were looking at. They didn't have to wear a fucking helmet over their head that blocked what they were seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had 3 of the most inept kids giving directions.
Go left, right? Go left, no.
Did you say right?
Punch him in the balls! I don't think I'm allowed to do that.
But, of course, not all these things were game shows. Of course, the most common show related to video games were, of course, the video game review shows, or Tips and Tricks series. I think one of the more obvious ones was something like Video Power, which, honestly, I do not really recall all that much about, because I was pretty young at the time.
I don't either.
But they also had, GamePro TV, which, if I recall, one of them actually started out as sort of a competition, but later on it just became sort of a strict gameplay and review show. I
I'm
believe
not
that's
sure.
the one that you were talking about, Ozzy, where they end up and they just kind of run through a big thing and pick out, like,
Yeah,
they have like a
there's
shopping spree.
yeah, there's like this. I can't. I don't remember if it was Video Power or something else, where it was like they had this little section that was probably about the size of like a modern day GameStop that had just had games lined up on the walls. They had like something like a cart or something to throw the games in. It was kind of like the Toys R Us toy run, except it's just only with video games.
Which is
So
just so much better. If I won the toy run, I would have gone straight to the video game section and stayed there the whole time.
Yeah,
Who wants
like
20 bikes?
I remember them running around throwing games in their cart, and I remember there also being like a slide thing they could go down to get to like other stuff or something. But
I remember that too, where they had to go down the slide and they could like grab games off of the. That might have been Video Power. I know there's some videos of it on YouTube where they have like an entire episode of it, a couple of them.
I just remember it's one of those things where I remember watching it a few times, but I don't think I ever really got into it, which is probably why I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah,
for sure, because it's like one of those things where you just watch it and you're like, gee, I wish that was me.
Yeah, it's like you don't want to watch kids do that. You want to do that yourself.
Fuck this show.
You don't want to watch kids do that. You want to do that yourself. You want to go out and have fun doing that stuff. You want to come home with $800 worth of video games.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I never actually saw that. I never actually heard of that show. The only thing I really had here in Canada, and when actually researching this for the podcast, I can't believe it actually lasted as long as it did. It was a show on YTV called Video and Arcade Top 10, which basically it was a half hour. They tried to cram so much into a half hour, it actually like hurt your head a little bit. It was a video game competition where they would have 4 kids on stage playing like one game, whoever got the most points or got the furthest in a level. They had a kid in the audience who was paired up with them too. So if they won, then they won, and they got paired with someone at home, and they would all win like, consoles and video games and things like that.
Would the kid they picked in the audience actually interact with the game, or would they just be?
Nope, they would just be there.
Guy? Okay,
it would just be the luck of the draw.
If you're like really good, but you're paired with somebody who was just crap at the game and you suck and you end up losing because of them.
Yeah. The funny thing too is that basically the hosts of the show, and they went through so many hosts. The one thing that they would do is they wouldn't actually do commentary on the gameplay. They wouldn't say like, "Oh, he's getting to this point. He's getting to this point. Oh, he's taking the lead." Basically, they would just tell you how to play the game. Basically, they would be reading the instruction manual to you. I think they did other things like they had like letter of the day, and so they would give a kid a Nintendo game or something. But that's the funny thing with this show is that it was predominantly Nintendo, like no Sega at all. I think in the later seasons of, well, if I'm going to follow Wikipedia here, in the later seasons they actually started going towards Sony and PlayStation. But I can't believe that this show went from 1991 to 2006, almost 16 years. That's crazy. Yeah, for a video game show, that is pretty impressive.
That's longer than some shows that have storylines.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine it's easier to shoot a show that doesn't have a storyline than one that does.
Yeah, but
you just kind of let the contestants shape things. Because if you compare that to something to a game show, because it is primarily a game show, right? But they have a lot of other things.
But to be fair, you don't have a lot of game shows that stick. You got like Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy,
and that's
a couple
about
other ones.
Yeah,
and Millionaire, I suppose.
Yeah, they would. It was a game show, but it also did other things. Like they would only focus so much on the kids playing the game, and then they would immediately jump to maybe like a 2-minute review of the game that they were playing or something else that came out. Like
it's almost like a variety show.
Pretty much,
video games.
And
did they ever have like sketches?
No, there was no sketches. It was basically just like kids playing the game. It's be like, okay, as an example, it's like let's say they're playing Darkwing Duck on the NES. It'd be like, oh, since they're playing Darkwing Duck on the NES, let's tell you about the Game Boy version. It's pretty similar, and it was crazy too because everybody on the show, all the personalities, they would talk a mile a minute. You could barely make out anything that they were saying. So, like, if you blinked, the show was over. You're like, oh, okay, the kid won, and then he won a Nintendo Action set. Okay.
So, like, it's like they're being paid so heavily to market stuff, they had to blur out so much per episode that they couldn't get it all in, so they talked too fast, basically.
Pretty much. They had to basically get the kids playing, read the instruction manual, give a couple of tips, maybe a cheat code here and there. And then that was it. That was the end of the show. I would actually like to go back to the last couple of seasons while this show was still on the air, because I'm actually like I said, I'm surprised it lasted this long. I kind of stopped watching it after I moved out and didn't have TV.
What games they'd be playing in 2006?
Well, according to this, they switched over to Sony, so I'm imagining I don't know, Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I really don't know. I have to go and try and find these episodes.
Cooper, Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah, something like that. And also, the theme song that they used was actually Crashman Stage. I actually pointed that out in our 4-up of Mega Man 2 when I got there. I was like, oh, this is the theme song to the Video and Arcade Top 10. And you're just like, what are you guys talking about? Crazy shows.
I'm partial to Metal Man Stage, but when I mentioned sketches, I was actually thinking about another show that I suppose would work pretty well even today until it stops sucking, but that would be the review show of X-Play, which it was such a there were no other shows like it, really. There are no other video game review shows on TV. Which, it seems like a wasted market, really. And in that sense, you don't really have any movie review shows either. You have the at the movies things, or it's not even at the movies anymore, it's something else.
I don't even think that show's on anymore.
It sort of is, but it's called something else now. I don't even know when it's on, I never watched it, but they don't, and of course they keep moving it around in different time slots. I guess the idea of broadcasting reviews of things, I guess even book reviews or movie reviews, is really sort of unneeded. So I guess these shows aren't really all that lucrative to do anymore.
Yeah, I think it's like nowadays it's much too easier for anything review related. It's much too easier to just go on the internet and try to find a reviewer who you can tell their tastes align with yours to see what they think of whatever it is.
Yeah, but the great thing about X-Play was they really knew their video games. That was what they did. They reviewed video games and they made it entertaining and they made it funny whenever possible. And they had just a great system for reviewing them as well. It was just on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, because you can't quantify what 0.1% is. Right? It's like you can't quantify what 98.07 is versus 98.06. You can't tell that this game is this much better. What exactly entails that extra 0.01%? The music is slightly better or something, or it has...
I think stuff like that is when reviewers wanted to give something a 7 out of 10, but they didn't want to actually give it a 7 out of 10 because they didn't want to piss off the publisher, so they gave it like a 7.5 or some bullshit.
But X-Play's explanation for it was games have a small quantifiability. You can't really compare one game to another in terms of minuscule differences. So their thing was a 3 is average, 4 is if you are a fan of this genre or a fan of this series, you should probably pick it up. A 5 is if you consider yourself any kind of gamer, you should get this. Even if you don't have the system, you should consider getting it. So 5s were very rare for that show. 2 is if you are a fan of the series, you might like it, otherwise you could probably skip it. And 1 is avoid at all costs. So, and that pretty much entails everything that they reviewed. And it worked really well. I used to watch that show all the time. It was pretty much the only thing I watched on G4, or back then I suppose it was actually called Tech TV, and they were called Extended Play. That was a lot of video game stuff. They even had this show they would show at 10 o'clock at night called Cinematech. Did you ever hear that one?
Cinematech. That was the one where they showed video game cutscenes?
Just video game footage. Sometimes if it wasn't cutscenes from games, it was just somebody playing. It was basically a commentary-less Let's Play. And they would just kind of show footage from these games. I actually discovered some indie games by watching that, because I saw a game about this guy in a cave, and it looked like it had a really neat combat and physics engine. I checked it out. It was fun. It was called Cave Jumper, I think. Just a really retro-looking game, but it was a fun game. So if you want to Google that, you can check that out later. But yeah, X-Play was the only decent game review show that really seemed to understand that games are very much a matter of preference. So that's what their star ratings took into account. Was if you like the series, you'll probably enjoy it a lot more than somebody who doesn't. But even if you don't like the series, it's still a very good game.
And I gotta say, that show had the first female host of a video game show program that I actually respected, because she actually knew what she was talking about. Morgan Webb.
Yes, that was.
Because she came from the early days of Tech TV. I think she was on the screensavers for quite a bit.
And Morgan Webb was great. Adam Sessler, holy crap, he's like the patron saint of gamers.
Yeah,
he really knows his shit. You can tell he's so passionate about these games. He was like one of the perfect people to be a host on this show.
The only reason I would actually go to the G4 website actually was for Adam Sessler, and he had like his own web series, Sessler Soapbox.
Soapbox, which he does. He does his own new show now. It's off of the G4 website.
Yeah. Well, he's now on Revision 3 Games or Rev 3 Games on YouTube.
So, what about shows that... Well, these shows did technically have scripts, but they were more written, of course, in the review style. What about shows that actually had written scripts that revolve around video games? For example, the first example that I remember growing up was the TV show Reboot.
Ah, yes, Reboot.
I forgot about Reboot.
You people are welcome for that, because that's from my country.
That was shit. Mainframe Entertainment. They also did the Beast Wars. They did the Beast Wars series.
Beast Wars, Beast Machines, War Planets, which unfortunately was called Shadow Raiders here.
War Planets was a weird fucking concept. Planets that turn into robots. Okay.
I think like giant engines that could be turned into ships.
I never really cared for Reboot. But I will say one thing that's very memorable about it, even though I didn't like it, was warning, incoming game.
Yes, those were the best episodes where they went into the video games. And, of course, the real problem with Reboot was that it aired on ABC, which I believe at the time was just getting bought out by Disney. So they had a lot of broadcast standards and practices that they had to abide by. And it really hurt them, especially when it was coming from a Canadian production that might not have been used to working with the laws with American broadcasts, with American BS&P.
Yeah.
So that's why the
around.
character of Dot Matrix in the first season, she has what they call the mono breast. She has no separation between her breasts underneath her jumpsuit.
Well, then you got to realize too that this was early 90s. Like this was
this was very early CGI, but they were capable of doing better than that. But they made them get rid of it. They made her look less human, I suppose. I mean, she already had green skin, so. But of course, then when they got out of that season, they were continued for they had one season on the Disney Channel, which did okay, or not the Disney Channel, but ABC, which did okay, and it was almost completely an episodic, where it's just one episode and then stuff happened from there, and had no connection to anything that happened in later episodes. But then about halfway through season 2, it started getting really good, where each episode actually started to have gravitas and meaning, and stuff actually continued from one episode to the next. There was actually an overarching storyline that got really dark at some points.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, mentioning how those really early computer graphics for TV shows at the time is I think the actual theme of the show really helped them out, because
it was
you don't
set
need
within a computer.
You don't need it to look lifelike.
Yeah, you expected it to look somewhat unrealistic. It was supposed to look like it takes place inside of a computer, which it technically did.
Yeah. That was one thing it definitely did good.
Yeah, the best thing about that show was the video game parodies that they did. There was even one, the entire premise of the episode was based around this. The episode was called When Games Collide. The entire purpose of it was the fact that two games ended up getting intermixed. It was like a dinosaur game and a military war game, and they ended up getting intermixed. So you have airplanes flying around the sky like pterodactyls. And then rhinos with tanks on their back, or triceratops with tank turrets on their back. And that was just an awesome concept.
What you're saying is Reboot predicted Dino D-Day.
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh Lord.
They parodied all kinds of great stuff on that show. There was even one where they parodied Austin Powers in one of the later episodes. And it was done as like a throwaway gag where the Enzo was Dr. Evil and the user came in and he just kind of shot him and it was game over.
The one I'll always remember was it's probably one of my favorite episodes is when he went into the Mortal Kombat ripoff.
Yes, the Mortal Kombat. That was a great episode. That was where the series actually started to get really serious. Spoiler alert, that's where the one where Enzo essentially dies. But he doesn't die, he ends up leaving with the game, but Mainframe thinks he's gone. He thinks he's been destroyed by the game winning, which never actually made sense to me. Why does winning the game destroy the sector? If you did that, that would mean you're... Is that based on the old thing that's like, don't you play your game on my computer, you'll screw up my computer?
Probably. I'm thinking that. It's just like, you're playing, oh yeah, I won this, and it's bad sector now on your hard drive. Like, damn it! Now I gotta reboot the whole thing. That was my favorite just because of like how dark it was, and everyone was like fearful. It's like, don't get the red guy with the hook, because you'll lose. And he was feeling like, I think basically wasn't Enzo, wasn't he Scorpion basically?
Yeah, he was essentially Scorpion because it was based on a. It was like Mortal Kombat, but it had like other characters. I mean, the final guy was called Zaytan, which is like, okay, that's kind of obvious.
Yeah, and then like he actually loses the eye, loses the match. I think like Andrea, she's the one that turned the reboot icon so that they could stay in the game after they lost.
They switched it to AI mode, but that was something that they had never hinted at ever before. So that seemed kind of Deus Ex Machina, but I mean, it sort of made sense. But they just pulled that right out of their ass.
The only thing I got against Reboot is that it never ended. Like, they left on such a big cliffhanger, and it's just like, no.
Because, I mean, as it reached the Season 4, Season 4 wasn't actually a season. It was 2 mini-movies that were originally released and were later released again as an 8-part season.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the real unfortunate things with, like, Western cartoons is, like, most shows, even the ones that have really deep storylines, never have a conclusion.
Because as soon as they stop getting profitable, they just pull the plug on them. They don't let them run out the season. Or they don't let them come to a conclusion with the series.
Sonic Sat AM.
Yeah.
That, Gargoyles,
Gargoyles
Samurai
did
Jack.
that. Although Gargoyles sort of got a conclusion in the Goliath Chronicles, but...
Yeah, but that was like the Dragon Ball GT of Gargoyles because the series creator had been pulled from the show.
So, other scripted series, you have something like the show Code Monkeys, which I know, Johnny, you haven't really seen. Ozzy, are you familiar with Code Monkeys at all?
No. Not at all.
I guess the best way to describe it is try to imagine Scott Pilgrim vs. the World as a 8-bit animated TV show. Where it has a really neat premise where it's based off of game developers in like the 1980s. So all the graphics are like not even 1980s, I think it's like the 1970s, because they're talking about development of games like E.T., or as the CEO called it, ET.
Oh, stupid executives!
He's here talking about some game called ET. Well, he was a Texan, because the first episode had their company was bought out by They used to be owned by, I think, like Steve Wozniak actually, and he left the company and he sold it to this rich Texan who really didn't know much about video games, but he had a lot of money. So it was about the game developers and game programmers in the time, and they're all represented as 16-bit sprites. So they have a lot of really good potential humor in the show, but they ended up making it almost too much like South Park or Family Guy. I suppose Family Guy is a better analogy for it, because South Park actually has its own brilliance, but Family Guy, like the later seasons of Family Guy, where they're trying to be offensive just for the purpose of controversy, just to get people to watch the show, which was a wasted opportunity. I liked Code Monkeys, but it got a bit repetitive, I will admit. And of course, they used the Jonathan Colton song as the theme song.
Although, if we want to talk about other video game related stuff, there's actually been some pretty good video game related web shows.
Yeah, there has been.
Years, like The Guild.
The Guild, I haven't personally seen The Guild, but I've heard a lot of really good things about it. I've been meaning to watch it. Of course, even stuff that like people like us do. I mean, Johnny, your show is technically a video game related web series, because you have you have your little sketches in there. Thing could be said about things like Video Game Bunker, or even people like Spoonie who do reviews and stuff and kind of have their overarching storylines like that.
And then you have really terrible things like the Tommy Y Show.
Yes.
This is not my house.
No,
I was in the middle.
Why?
I was in the middle of preparing an egg breakfast.
Like that was funny.
That lasted all
really
2 episodes?
Started that whole web series sketch comedy thing was Mega 64, where they just kind of did these sketches based off of video game concepts, and that stuff was later brought on by people like Rooster Teeth TV, who did stuff like Immersion. And I think that's really where you get a lot of the best video game related comedy, because these are shows made by gamers for gamers, and compared to other shows that were shows made by TV executives for what they think gamers are.
Yeah, and you got to remember with executives that don't really understand games, it's like you get the situation with like Microsoft when they acquired Rare, and they're like, oh, so we own Donkey Kong now?
Oh, that's funny. There was another show that you guys brought up just before we started recording. They used to air on Spike TV. That was aimed at the complete wrong audience.
What was it called again, Johnny? Because you're the one that found the name.
Let me get my notes here. What was it? Fresh Baked Video Games. They had
even
things
the name makes me hate it.
They had a segment called "A Free Video Game for a Shot to the Nuts." Or basically, it's like, hey, you want a video game?
That sums up the series right there, I think.
And they also had, oh god, which feels better? They had some girl in a blue bikini sit in the vibrating chair controller, because there was that controller which was featured on. If you want to know what it is, go look at those clips of Steve Carell playing Tony Hawk in 40-Year-Old Virgin. This girl would sit in this chair and she would play different video games until like the rumble feature was built into the chair, and she'd be like, "Which one feels better?" Oh, I don't know. Oh god, and that was after Gamehead, the precursor to Game Trailers TV with Jeff Keighley.
I remember that show being immensely painful. I think I watched it a couple times, and then I'm like, Impact's done. I'm not watching what's coming on after it.
No.
Which is bad, because I was willing to tolerate TNA Impact, but not that show.
Yeah, the people who like wrestling still don't like your damn video game show. Take that as a warning, people.
Yeah, and with all the I think Jeff Keighley, for some reason, I don't know why Jeff Keighley gets a hard time with game trailers, and because it's not like he's new to the game. He's been doing this for a while. I forgot to bring this up when we were talking about video game shows. There's one that was airing in Canada. It's still airing now, but they've kind of moved away from games and just talked about everything, like movies and music and all that. It's called Electric Playground. It was started up by Victor Lucas and Tommy Tallarico, who's done like a lot of great video game soundtracks, like Earthworm Jim, what was that Draw Dinosaur game on the NES?
Color
He did
Dinosaur.
that.
Yeah, isn't
Dinosaur.
he also the one touring with Video Games Live?
Yeah, that's actually why he's no longer on the show. Is that Video Games Live is his full-time gig now. But when the show first started, basically it was a lot of their E3 coverage, like interviews with developers, and then at the end they would have reviews on the run where they would just do quick 3-minute reviews of video games. And for everyone that thinks that James Rolfe invented Angry Video Game and reviewed Angry Reviewing, I can't find it on YouTube, but if you can find on YouTube, look for Tommy Tallarico reviewing High Heat Baseball 2003 for the PC. It's the most angry I've ever seen anyone at a video game.
I've seen his review of Big Rigs Over the Road Racing.
Oh my God.
That's another good one.
Yeah.
I've never played Big Rigs, but I know that it's supposed to be incredibly terrible.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's amazingly terrible. It is hilariously bad.
Yeah, but with this show, like that's what I like. It's still going strong. It's now daily. It's like it's on 5 times a week, and they've actually taken the reviews on the Run show and turned that into its own separate half-hour show where they review video games now. And now they're doing Blu-rays, like reviewing the Blu-ray releases and their special features. But the thing with the Electric Playground, there's a lot of people that got their start on that show that are in the game industry. Like Jeff Keighley was a correspondent for them for quite a while. Until he moved to Game Trailers and Spike. And also, Jade Raymond was a correspondent for them before she went to Ubisoft and was a producer on Assassin's Creed. And for some reason, they picked up Julie Stouffer, the Real World. Was it New Orleans? I can't remember.
I never saw Real World or any of those shows.
No.
That was back when MTV stopped becoming MTV and it was just like FTV.
Yeah. No, but that was a great show, and I'm glad to see that it's still on the air, even though they've moved away from just solely video games, but they're still doing, everything else geek related.
Yeah, I think it's just sort of a sign that TV executives honestly don't know how to make a show that's marketed toward gamers specifically, because when they do that, it's marketed to the wrong market. Because gamers are not a small subculture anymore. It's possible the bro gamers actually outnumber the other hardcore gamers. I'm trying not to segment people, but they are just a big demographic. So network executives see this and they just see money signs in it, and they just, how can we market to the most people? And marketing towards the geeky gamers just is not fiscally responsible for them. They want to market to as many people as possible. So I guess if you do want to see the really good kind of video game series marketed to real core gamers, you have to go online. I guess that's the only example, because it's proof that the people do not know what the fuck they're doing. Just look at any episode of CSI where they have to do anything about video games. Like CSI or NCIS or maybe JAG might have done it at some point.
Yeah, well, we've seen many instances where the media clearly doesn't understand video games. So it's like the thing where you'd always see somebody playing a game on TV, and you'd see them
they're flailing around crazy.
It's like nobody plays games like that.
Well, maybe some games, but you're probably not doing very well at it.
Yeah. I think only one of the shows now that kind of gets it and tries to be as close as possible is The Big Bang Theory. Whenever you see Sheldon,
anytime they do anything, that's like the one show that ever gets it right, and people fucking hate The Big Bang Theory for some reason. It's like they're the only ones who are getting it right. Yes,
and they're even going the extra mile.
It's something.
They even go the extra mile. Like you see Leonard and Sheldon playing Wii Sports Resort, and they're playing the bow and arrow, and they're actually it's like no, you got to do it right, and they're doing the full motion with the Wiimote.
Yeah, people hate Big Bang Theory simply by virtue of it being a sitcom, which I've met a lot of people like that. They hate sitcoms just because they're sitcoms. But there's good ones, there's bad ones. I think The Big Bang Theory is a good one. It has good writing. But people don't like the aspects of nerdsploitation in it.
Well,
You must really hate the king of the nerds then.
Yeah. I mean, you have stuff like CSI Miami or just CSI in general, where they actually had an episode where they chased somebody around Second Life. Trying to track down his IP address or something.
I remember that.
Ow.
Vaguely.
That hurt my brain. Ow.
Or the one where they had to get to level 10 in Prince of Persia, a game which doesn't have a fucking level system, in order to unlock a hidden file on the game console. It's like, what? Really? This happens in what world? And the sad thing is, most people that watch this show, they don't understand that this is completely fucking wrong. They don't understand a damn thing. It's just, oh, it's video games. It's weird. It makes sense if you're a video gamer. It's like, no, it fucking doesn't.
Hey, son, how do I get to level 10 in Prince of Persia? There are no levels, Dad. Well, actually, CSI told me CSI's not right.
The funny thing is you think about it, it's really reminiscent of how media used to portray Dungeons and Dragons, where they didn't even remotely understand anything about it.
Yeah, it's like they read somebody else's blurb about the back of the box, where it's like, it's a fantasy role-playing game.
Like they take a tabletop pen and paper game, and they'd instead not realize the episode they basically did about a LARP, which is not the same thing.
Have you ever seen a show on this where they try to actually describe a video game that doesn't exist? Or they actually show footage of the game they're playing? And it's always the most ludicrous thing that you could never actually do in a video game, where it looks just so much worse than an actual video game would, or it looks so much better than the actual video game would at the time.
Or even better, they make up a game for the show, and then they show an actual clip from a real game that's not the game they're talking about.
It's Afterburner! Or
whatever the time they whatever
I remember
anyone
one that was described on Family Matters that I actually thought seemed kind of cool. It was called Space Donkeys. And it has them going around, and they're playing it with a joystick, like an Atari 2600 joystick, but you can clearly see a Nintendo on top of the TV. And it's just these donkeys braying and like laser beams being shot out. And it's like, I can get to the 12th level in Space Donkeys. It's like, cool, you want to play with me? Sure. And they go to explain. It's like,
I don't think I remember that episode, but I'm willing to bet all the money I own that the sound effects were from Pac-Man on Atari 2600. That's like the go-to sound effect for anyone. Like, we're playing video games.
Actually, this is like original sound effects. It was like just donkey noises. It's just kind of like donkeys in space or whatever. But I wanted to see what was showing on the TV, because it's just like The Wizard. They talk about video games. You don't want to see them playing. You want to see the actual game they're playing.
Like, oh man, he got the top score in this random game. Oh yeah?
Oh yeah,
How?
I got a billion points.
How? Oh, he just stood there and said California, and he got the top score.
You got 50,000 points in Double Dragon when you started mashing buttons before they actually let you play the game?
You went through Ninja Gaiden in one run without even taking a hint? Bullshit!
That's like one of those kids at the school park. It's like, that game's so easy, I played through it the first time without dying. It's like, fuck you. You are completely lying. You're lying, that's a lie. You are a liar.
Stop lying.
You're bad and you should feel bad.
Oh, well, this is a bit of a short episode, but I guess that ends it for now. Ozzie, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at planetarcane.blogspot.com or on YouTube at youtube.com/user/OzzieArcane.
And Johnny?
They can find me at youtube.com/AchievementHordeJohn.
And you can find me at youtube.com/DragonSlayerProd or any of my other channels. You can find me at TestZero.net. You can find us all at ReviewersUnknown.com. Leave a message below. Tell us what you thought, what some of your favorite video game TV shows are, whether they're actually video games shows that are based on video game culture or based on specific video game series. Until next time, make sure you like, favorite, subscribe, tweet, whatnot, share, Facebook, other 21st century buzzwords. We will see you folks later.